everybody, this is Lisa Harper, and you're listening to Not Ready Yet, Curating Conversations for the Aging Journey podcast. This is a show that is going to change how we have conversations with our loved ones about aging and the difficult and complex life decisions our aging loved ones are going through. Today, we are talking with Dr. Karina Loyo, author of The Longevity Blueprint for Health, Wellness, and Purpose, Embracing the Rest of Your Life. And it's a step-by-step guide to navigate aging with confidence, control, and peace of mind, which, my goodness, just those three things alone we all want at all times of our lives, but especially in our later part of life. So we're going to do a deeper dive on the blueprint here in a moment. But first, I just wanted to give you a little bit more about how special it is that we have Dr. Loyo with us today. She has received her PhD from the University of Texas at Austin in health education and gerontology, and her MBA from Texas State University. She has written and contributed to numerous peer-reviewed journals as a public speaker and has experience more than 3 decades as a research scientist, a project manager, and a marketer. Her dedication to educating and advocating is remarkable, which you will find out here. Her compassion shines through everything, even her voice, which you want to hear, and I'll stop talking here. So I want you to welcome, let's hear from our guest. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Karina.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me. It is so exciting to be here on your Not Ready Yet podcast. It's so true. So many people are just not ready yet, or they think they aren't, or that it's too early, and it really isn't.
100%. And that is, I think all of us in this sector, our heart is here. We want people to plan more because they don't. We know the statistics that, it takes usually 7 red flags, something happening, some kind of crisis happening for the family to kind of get on board and say, we have to do something different. This isn't sustainable. This isn't healthy. And so what inspired you to write the Longevity Blueprint?
Wow. Well,
is that too big?
Well, you know what? In a way, it's very simple, and in a way, it is really big. So I guess the short version of it is that I have seen so many people, so many families who've had a medical crisis, and that quickly has become a financial crisis for the spouse and even created a generational financial crisis. Now, that's the short version of it. The longer version is a little bit deeper explanation of that, right? So usually you have a happy couple, life's going along, things are going well, and all of a sudden, very unexpectedly, one of them has a medical incident. Normally, when we're talking about our older population, we're talking about a fall, a stroke, a heart attack, or maybe a chronic disease diagnosis like cancer. Those happen very suddenly. And most people think, oh, it's never going to happen to me. I'm still young and healthy. Well, I want to tell you, when I was first married, I thought the first time that I would be in the hospital with my husband would be when I was having a baby. In reality, shortly after he turned 22 years old, we were in the hospital. And it was because he had a blood clotting disorder. And so I'm here to tell you that you're never too young to have something happen, and you're never too young to plan for it. And so what drove me to write this is kind of that personal experience that I had with him, with my grandparents, because, you know that when I moved here from Mexico City, I came to help my grandfather with my grandmother had Alzheimer's. And I thought, wow, this is a win-win situation. I mean, at 18, you think going away to college and living with your grandparents is a cool thing to do. You never expected that less than 3 months later, my grandfather would have a stroke as well. And then he would end up in a wheelchair and with a speech impediment. And now I was taking care of 2 older adults, one with Alzheimer's, one post-stroke. And 3 days after that, I turned 19. Gosh. So I was thrown into the whole caregiving thing. So I've had firsthand experience multiple times. When my father passed away, my mother came to live with me for the first 5 years after that. And so all of these experiences have really raised in me the awareness that when we look critically at aging, especially right now with the amount of baby boomers that we have, one of the things that I keep seeing over and over again is the fact that women tend to outlive their men, usually by 10 to 15 years. And when we have this medical crisis, we women, we want to take care of everyone and make everything better, right? So we do everything we possibly can for our spouse. And that includes getting them all the medical care and getting all those bills and really doing everything we possibly can for them. And we don't stop to think about the fact that we're going to live another 10 or 15 years. And if we spend everything that we have on them, we're not going to have anything but Social Security to live off of. And that becomes our personal financial crisis as women. Sometimes it's men, but the majority of it is women who are going to outlive their spouses. And then if we don't have sufficient, who's going to help us? Well, it's usually our daughters. And then our daughters are going to be the ones that have to decide, okay, mom needs help. I'm going to drop to part-time. I'm not going to take that promotion. Now that family and that generation starts to have financial implications because when they're not earning, they're not being able to save for their own retirement. And so you can quickly see how it's going to trickle down into the grandchildren and beyond as generational impact that we're just not talking about. And so when I saw that, I'm like, we've got to put a stop on this.
Yeah.
Most people, they are so excited to go on vacation that they start planning for months in advance. We don't do that with our own aging, and we really, really need to.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, I can only have so many one-on-one conversations. How can I do more? And it was writing the book and getting the book out there.
Well, that is so powerful because I talk about the future you. I feel like at some point, and what you're saying, that cascade into each generation because
Yeah.
somebody's trying to fix something else for someone that happened, and that just because it just because becomes this overwhelming, and burden is such a harsh word, but I feel like our aging loved ones, the baby boomers, the ones that are going through more of the fragile years, that's their biggest fear is the burden and
Yeah.
running out of money. I don't
Right.
want to be a burden to my kids and I don't want to run out of money. And so it becomes like almost this, like you say, we plan for college, we go to all these campuses, which one are we going to? We, plan so much when we have a first child and there's all these books and everything. And then it's like we get to this part and we more kind of sit, it's almost like I visualize people holding their breath. Like just, I don't know what to do. And it's like this paralyzing moment where, wow, can we reverse that? And with your book, I think that's what is possible.
Right.
Can we, as a society, be looking at this proactively with the same excitement for our future you at that stage of life that we did, like you say, when we're going to college? And it's just, that's where I hope, these conversations start forming because that trickle down effect that you're talking about it keeps, it's like a cycle of how do we get out of this? And somebody
Right.
has to step outside of it and go, I'm going to get the longevity blueprint and we are going to sit down in our family and have these moments and start to come up with a plan that we're proactive. And so I love one of the things you say that, it's about, reinventing yourself as a retiree, that you can design your ideal aging in place home. You want people to safeguard their health and wealth for the years ahead. And those things I think are so empowering that I hope people hear that and go, yeah, that's what I want to do. I don't want to sit here in this little like cubicle, this like, oh, I can't think of the word with the butterfly.
Yeah.
And be paralyzed by decisions. So in your book, you are offering people, it's a blueprint for their life because everybody's
Well,
different.
right. Exactly. And see, and I explain this in the book, when you have a baby, everybody comes and gives you all sorts of advice, right? But when you have an aging adult and that starts to have issues, you don't talk about it. Most people will not have conversations about, what kind of brief should I get for mom?
Yeah.
We don't. Now, you're right. I do talk about, finding a passion and that it's not too late to start getting healthier. That is so absolutely true. And I think it's really important to know and understand that what I try to put in the book, it really isn't just for the last stages of your life. The reality is we're aging in our 30s and 40s. And at any point in time, just like my first husband at the age of 22 ended up with a chronic problem, I know of people who have strokes and heart attacks in their 40s and 50s. So it really is, in my mind, more of the adulting 101 that we're not doing.
That's
They
a
said,
That's a perfect way to put it. The things that, yeah, you get to certain parts of life, you're like, gosh, nobody told me that. I saw
yeah,
family members go through it. I have no idea what they went through. They didn't share. I
right.
saw things, but I don't know the details of it. So you're right. And I mean, the definition for aging in place starts at 40.
Yes.
That's by definition. So, for those of you out there that just went, what? That is definitely, this is the time to get your things in order.
Well, and speaking of getting things in order, statistics wise, in the US, only about 50% of adults have anything in order. What I mean by that is even like a will, if you want to do not resuscitate order, medical power of attorney, a durable power of attorney, these types of things that really a lot of people associate with the oldest of the old needing them. But the reality is, everybody of the age of 18 really should think about having all these documents in place because, as much as I hate to bring up the negative side of it, the reality is your young child that is going off to college could be involved in a accident or a car wreck, and if you don't have medical power of attorney for them, it's going to be more difficult to be able to help make those decisions for them. And so these are things that really are adulting 101 things. They're not, let's wait till the end of life. The problem is we have not talked about it as a society every day. When we're saying we're not ready yet, okay, it really starts with the parents telling their children, hey, congratulations, welcome to adulthood. Here's some documents that we need to do from the time you're 18 years old on, so that we're able to help our children during that early portion of their adulthood. And then these should just be revised as we get older. It isn't something that, oh, now you're 65, now you need to do this. No, you should have done it started when you were 18, 21 at the latest.
And there is like, I feel, the longevity economy, the book, The Longevity Economy, talks about, we're kind of in the space of people. I mean, this modern world we live in, the affluent world we live in now, didn't exist before. This is the first cycle, really, of this type of generational wealth. And people, we don't have a plan. There hasn't been one laid out. We feel paralyzed by all the decisions. And I'm hearing, which I love, and I highly recommend this to people, is that people that are in their 40s, the sandwich generation, the generation that's looking, going, mom and dad, they weren't so great when we went back for the holidays or that last visit that we had. What I'm hearing, and I have heard this on a couple instances, that the people that are seeing that are very aware, they're going through your plan and inviting their adult parent, their aging loved one, to do it together. Like,
Right.
I know I don't have these things in plan, do you? And it starts this conversation, and let's sit side by side with the blueprint of figuring this out. But it's like some of the sandwich generation, the Gen Xers, are getting to the point where they're understanding, just in our lifetime, because I'm a Gen Xer, but the change of medical technology in general, and how long we are living. And
Right.
understanding that when Social Security started, it was like really you were, expected to live another 10 years in all honesty.
Right.
And we are blowing that out of the water. And so I think this side, like people, I think, in that were our 70s babies and stuff are like, okay, this is eye opening. And they're watching their parents and they're seeing not a plan. So that's my situation, was two parents pass away, no plan whatsoever. And so that's why I'm here, because I feel a responsibility now to help other sandwich generation go, we can do this differently and we can do it together. But with a book like yours, with the longevity blueprint, to sit down together and maybe we can get two generations at once to come up with their individual plans and the same family.
Yeah, and sometimes what I tell people, because I do get approached by a lot of people who are like, oh, my parents, they just will not talk about this, right? And they do come from the generation where they're more private about these things and they don't want to talk about it. My dad, for example, was one of the ones who, my brother sent him an attorney 3 times to go get a will drawn up, and 3 times they sat and chatted over tequilas and never got a will done. So he died intestate. So I know what a mess that is. But what I do is I tell people, if they don't want to talk about it, then let's leverage the fact that their role has always been to be your advisor. And so let's take the book, or sometimes it's, if I'm doing a one-on-one coaching with the family, so let's invite them into the conversation you and I are having about your plans for aging and preparing and getting all your documents in place, and ask their advice. And what happens is they're going to be there listening, they're going to be there engaged, they're going to start trying to give you advice on what you should do in different parts of it. And that's all planting seeds and making them think about, I don't have that in place. I need to get this document going. I have it written down, but I've never shared it with anybody. Or, oh my gosh, I have not removed my ex-husband from my, whatever deed or life insurance policy. And then they write and realize this, and they're able to take some action before it's too late. So
Right.
that's
Yeah,
really
that
important.
revisit together, like you say, and that reminds me of, you know, um, nobody wants to lose control over having decisions
Yeah.
over their own life. And it is that having that future you, I
Hmm.
call it, being able to go, well, if I don't have a plan and I haven't outlined my wishes and I haven't done it legally to the point that it can be upheld, if I should lose the ability to speak for myself, and it's like nobody wants to think in those ways. I get it.
Right.
But man, oh man, when we say, if the big thing with, I don't want to be a burden, I don't want to run out of money. If we don't have a plan, like you say, it sounds like you went through it too, like not having a will, you know, you turn over that control not to a family member, but to a system.
Right.
And it is, I think, like if people are educated, and that's what I'm hoping here, is
Hmm.
that I always say being, I don't think of classes. I think of, because this is a blue collar girl talking, this is my roots, but I don't think of it that way. I think of it as being informed and not informed.
Yes.
And in this day and age of the information era, shame on us if we have not taken that option to inform ourselves. And
Well,
that is what I just really hope people can grasp. Because, like you say, that
yeah.
generation, it was more quiet. I don't want to I don't want to disturb anything.
Right. Well, the other thing too is really have to look at this as the greatest gift that you can give your children.
Oh,
Because when you make the decision of what you want to happen with you, should you have a stroke, should you end up in a wheelchair, should you end up needing to have a tracheotomy or whatever it is that may happen to you in your life, when you make that decision for yourself and all your children have to do is follow what you wrote, then they don't ever have to have the burden of, oh my God, should I have done that? Should I have done more? Should I have not done that
yeah.
for the rest of their lives? Because
And
you made that choice.
that's a very
And
heavy
that
weight to
gives
carry.
so much peace of mind to the child that's dealing with it. And if you have more than one children, more than one child, and then they have different opinions on what should happen, well, that's awful. That
Yes.
is terrible because then you have one person say, oh, we should do this for mom. No, we should do that. No, we should do this. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, nobody's ever going to be satisfied. But if you have well, mom said she wanted this and this and this done, we're going to carry it out. And somebody says, well, I don't think I want to do that. Well, yeah, but mom said, and
Yeah.
we're going to go with what mom said. And that makes such a difference. And it
Right.
keeps the relationships because one of the things that we don't often think about is just as difficult as it is to think about your own what ifs and your mortality and your possibilities. It is even more difficult to think about the conflict that happens within families in these moments of crisis. And whenever we're in a crisis, we're just not able to even think clearly. Think of yourself as having a sudden, veil or, some kind of impediment to being able to think, and you make irrational decisions when you are in the moment of stress. So if we're able to make those decisions ahead of time, maybe we don't end up making all of the decisions, but maybe 80% of the decisions are already made. That burden off your shoulders of having to make them in that moment is so much better. And you are also less likely then to make decisions that are going to have these huge financial implications.
Yeah.
And so, like, one of the things that I point out in the book is the 5-year Medicaid clawback. And basically, what that means is that Medicaid can look at what you've done with your money and your assets for the last 5 years and can try to go back and recover it should they have had to pay for your medical stuff. So, for example, if you thought you should give your son the house and your daughter the car, and 3 years later, your medical bills amount to a whole lot, the Medicaid can come back and ask for the house back or a portion of it and can ask for the car back or the money equivalent to the value of that vehicle if it falls within those 5 years. Same thing if you make gifts in cash and things like that. And so my recommendation is to go ahead and talk to an attorney, because an attorney who specializes in estate planning or elder law are going to be the ones that are able to help you put in place things. There's multiple instruments such as a irreversible living trust or irrevocable living
Irrevocable? Yeah.
trust that they can put into place that will allow them to be able to protect those assets. And will also be able to tap into some Medicaid benefits even before you deplete all your assets. So there's all these benefits that you can actually have if you plan ahead. But to me, the most important one is just the peace of mind. Certainly, it's uncomfortable to think of yourself, what happens if I have a stroke? What happens if end up in a wheelchair? What happens if and if and if? But if you go ahead and play that what if game and just, write it down and share that with your loved ones, you're going to feel this like relief. It's kind of like getting the shot, right? When we were kids and we knew we were going to get a shot, we tortured ourselves for weeks up to the appointment, right? And then when it happened, it was like, yeah, it hurt, but it wasn't worth 2 weeks of feeling miserable. Okay, let's get this over with. And then you can go on and live your best life possible. Focus on finding your passion and meaning in your retirement and continuing to make yourself as healthy as possible. Because we know that the healthier you are, as you proceed through life, the healthier you're going to be at the end of your life. You're going to have highest quality of life. You're going to be less likely to need to be dependent on other people. And so those are the things that you can then focus all your energies on. Think of your longevity blueprint as almost just that long dreaded homework assignment that just has to get done. If that's what it takes to get through it, do it. If you need to think of it as the greatest gift you can give your kids, do that.
Uh,
But get it done because it's a really important thing. And like I said before, it's just an adulting 101 thing. So if you're not ready yet, guess what? You're never going to be ready. It's kind of like having a baby. Nobody's ever ready to have a baby. Nobody ever has enough money. Nobody ever has the house, the car, the everything you think you want before you have that baby. But we all make it through anyway. And the reality is, we're not going to stay here our whole lives. We're going to transition at some point in time. So
yeah.
may as well have the best plan possible for that for your family because it's about them. They're the ones that get to stay and help and deal with the situations.
Yeah, and I think that future you is about having agency over the whole timeline of your life.
Yes.
And I know just watching, I feel that, people can live in a paralyzing state of regret or I shoulda, woulda, coulda. And man, that's what I'm hoping. Because when we say the word yet, to me, the reason this podcast is named Not Ready Yet and Curating Conversations for the Aging Journey is because when I hear somebody say, I'm not ready yet, you're telling me you understand that you should be doing something. There is a need. You don't have a plan. The yet is what can we answer? What type of information do you need to get over the yet, to get through the yet? Because that yet to me is like, well, you should be doing something and you're not. So what information can you get? And that's what I'm hoping families can help each other with. Is because everybody's so specific or so individual that, but what is that question? Because the fear is the yet. And if we don't answer it and dive deeper, then we're not going to get on the other side of it. But having that agency throughout your whole entire life and not kind of throwing hands in the air at some point because, and I want people, it's almost like I want people to be able to move through things and not just pause and wait for things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I agree. And the thing is, I mean, there is a lot of documents to put together. And it is a daunting task because it takes time and you have to think about it. But you're not supposed to sit down and do this all in one day. You
Right.
sit down and do a little bit at a time. A lot of people ask me, oh, well, how'd you write the book? How do you write a book that's that big, right? Well, the reality is if you were to write 1 page a day and skip your weekends, at the end of a year, you would have a book that's 300 pages long. So your documents that you need to have in place as you age, they're not 300 pages long. They can be relatively simple. You can get it done in 20 pages or less. Most of it's the legal jargon that your attorney's going to put in there. So just write down an outline of the important things and then go talk to the right person. Schedule that appointment. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have thought about all the details. If you have nothing in place right now, you can look at your state and what they require. I'm in Texas, so you can actually write your own will. If you hand write it in your own writing, that's all you need to do. If you're going to type it up, you need 2 witnesses to your signature. That's it. You don't even need an attorney. Now, there are lots of reasons you want an attorney. And an attorney's definitely the best way to go because, somebody may decide to fight it. And if you didn't do everything exactly right, there's, loopholes that they'll be able to, do whatever they want with it. But the reality is that you can even just have that written down in your handwriting or with the 2 witnesses typed. And that's better than having nothing until you get to the attorney. Because
Yeah.
you never know how quickly life can change. And if you keep in focus that you're doing this not for you, well, maybe for you, because you do want to be able to tell people what you want done in case you aren't able to communicate. Like my grandfather couldn't speak very well, couldn't be understood very well. Or if you end up with a fall that caused you to be unconscious for multiple days, what do you do? Keep in mind that this is a gift back to them, that they won't have to make choices and they won't have to bear the burden of those choices. And that's huge relief for them. And
Huge
so,
relief and a way to keep the family together after
absolutely.
your passing.
Yes. Because even in the closest families, the grieving process and the family dynamics really get strained at that point in time.
Yeah.
And so it is important to do everything you possibly can. You've done that your whole life, right? I mean, as a mom, you do everything you possibly can to safeguard your children, to, keep them from getting hurt, keep them from, suffering through life. Why not do that same act of love here for these purposes? I
Yeah.
think it's real important. And then, it's not just about the documents. A big part of the book is about your own personal health and staying as healthy as you possibly can. And a big portion of that is the mental health. In fact, I dive very little into the physical health in the book other than you need to move it or you will lose it, right? We
Right.
all know that
Yeah.
is so important to stay as strong and physically active as we can. And believe it or not, weightlifting is the most important thing as we age to keep those muscles strong. It keeps the bones strong. But the mental health side of it, the staying engaged with people, the having good social connections and going out and participating in different things and having fun and really having a passion and a purpose for what it is that you do, whatever that means to you, and know that it's going to change,
Yeah.
right? Because there are things that you can do in your 60s and 70s when you're still very mobile and capable and driving. And then when you get into your late 70s and 80s, and maybe you can't drive, maybe your eyesight's going back, whatever it happens to be, your purpose has to change.
Yeah.
And what you do has to change. And so you have to find a new passion, a new purpose, and a new meaning at that point in time. And making sure that you have strong social support networks. Because unfortunately, as we age, so do our friends. And some
Right.
of them are not as healthy or as fortunate as we are. And we know that starting around our mid 50s, people start going to funerals every couple of months, and then every month, and then every week. And so you have to continue to expand your circle of friendships and circle of support across your lifespan. And if you're lucky enough to live to 100, you're going to have to make a lot of friends with people 20 years younger or more than you.
Yeah.
So that's going to
To
be
have
important.
that community.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know the statistics on isolation, and
Hmm.
like you say, if you are not adjusting and replacing things, if you can't do them anymore, finding something else that gives you that same fulfillment and purpose.
Yeah.
That isolation is, I think the latest is it's either like 15 or 17 cigarette smoking, 15 or 17 cigarettes a day if you
Yes.
are in deep isolation. And that is one thing I think the community aspect of it is so important. And it's so hard to put into words because it's
Right.
a feeling, it's an energy, it's a something that lasts beyond. And it's so hard. And I think once people stop receiving it, that they forget what that feels like.
Right. Yeah. And, and it's important to think about, leaving a legacy. Leaving a
Mm.
legacy is important. And even if it's a legacy just to your family, to tell them about yourself, to tell them about your parents and your grandparents and what was life like when,
Yeah.
you know, write it down, do videos, do audio, whatever it is, to kind of share those stories. Because that storytelling, I mean, it started back around the campfire circles. That was hundreds of years ago. That was the main thing people did. They sat by the fire and they talked about the family stories. And that's how they used to pass down the folklore and the, lessons learned and all the fables and stuff like that. They're all wonderful ways to teach. And so many kids these days, especially the ones that grew up with all these internet based tools and connectivity and all that, they really need to be able to have that human connection where they learn, okay, what was life like? Back then, what did you go through? And, lessons that you learned as well. And a lot of other people don't really think about the fact that some of the best books, textbooks, are written by people who are 70 and older. And it makes sense, right? When you stop and think about it, because they've got 50 years worth of experience in their content area. Why wouldn't they write an amazing book? Of
Yeah.
course they would. And so when people think you're too old or I'm not ready yet, I need more information, no, you're ready now. You
Yeah.
really are. And you have something to contribute now. You have lessons learned, you have experiences, I mean, the possibilities are endless.
And we talk about that. I volunteer and do some presentations at the senior center up the road. And, when I ask people, how many of you have family here or is everybody out of town? And it's amazing how many everybody's out of town.
Yeah.
And, I feel like we used to have that organic storytelling that wasn't forced, it wasn't planned. It was
Hmm.
just around a dinner table once a week or maybe once a month, depending
Yeah.
on, but that Sunday dinner or that gathering, that birthday gathering. And, when people aren't geographically near you, that really does, you have to be so much more intentional about it. I'm a big planner, so I'm a part of a planner community. It's like, paper calendar, all that stuff, tracking things. And we were getting together about planning our calendar for 2025. And somebody had on their monthly checklist to email grandma once and call grandma once. So grandma's getting an email once a month and a phone call once a month. And that was like her intention because she wants to stay in front of her and to be in touch with her. But
Yeah.
so many people don't have that intention built into their calendar, literally. And we don't have the geographic, we're not that proximity doesn't exist so much anymore. And I feel
Right.
like that is a sadness in what we have right now.
Hmm.
And I know there's those books, they were actually given out in our family to grandparents this year about, tell me about your life. And it's like, you can pick one question a week and just answer or flip through and go, yeah, I'll answer that question. Like, what was my first job interview? And then
Yeah.
they can tell their story.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a good heart feel for them too, to go back and reminisce and putting
Right.
something down on paper in that written
Yeah.
way with, I grab my pen. There is something that happens there in the heart too. And
Right.
so I encourage everybody to gather that info while you can. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And I also encourage people to remember that that phone, that email, the text messages, they go two ways. And so you as an older adult can also be the one to initiate the conversations. For a period in my life while I was working on my doctorate, I did a lot of therapeutic massage on older folks. And at first I thought, well, this is wonderful. I'm going to do the massage therapy on them. Touch is very important for older folks because normally they don't get very much touch. And they say that people need at least 12 hugs a day. And so if you're isolated and you're not getting that. So I thought, well, I'm doing that. I'm doing 15-minute massages twice a week on these folks. It's going to be a good service to them and I'm going to be able to pay some bills. Well, it turned out to be so much more than that because these people, they wanted to know about my life. I wanted to know about their life. I was like, oh, tell me about when you were a kid and tell me about your first job. And oh my gosh, I mean, before I knew it, every time I went, I was so excited to go because there were all these conversations and these history lessons and business lessons and nuggets of information that I would get. And it was so wonderful to be able to have those conversations. And so it reminded me that I also need to reach out to my grandparents. They still had one grandfather at the time, to ask him about his life and how, he became to be the person that he was. It's really interesting because as we look at older folks, sometimes, at least the ones maybe that we're not related to, we look at them and think, wow, how frail, or look at their abilities or whatever. And so we have some things that happen in our head that are very unconscious. And we make up these stories of who they are, but we really think more about who they are now as an older person, right? But there's a whole history behind these people. I mean, these guys may have been 5-star generals, or they may have been CEOs of companies, and yet all we really saw is, oh, he's using a cane right now. Well, but his brain is intact. He's an amazing leader. Tap into that knowledge.
Yeah.
And if you don't stop and have that conversation and ask that question, you will never know. We purchased a restaurant about a month and a half ago. And so I worked a few hours yesterday to give the manager some time off because we're still hiring people. And this lovely couple came in with their mom, or it was his mom, and she's 96 years old. She's in a wheelchair. And so, of course, I kind of navigated towards them, started talking with her. It was really neat. And as we started the conversation, her son said, oh yeah, she turned 96 in November and we're here celebrating. She used to live closer. She used to come to the restaurant all the time. Now we only come about once every 2 months. And then she said something like, yeah, I said, I grew up in Mexico and then moved here, talked about the gerontology thing. And she's like, oh, well, I grew up in Mexico too. And I'm like, so we started talking in Spanish. And I mean, her Spanish was perfect. And people tend to think, oh, you get older, you forget things. No, if you've talked a language your whole life, you remember that. If you had certain abilities your whole life, you still have those abilities, unless you end up with the Alzheimer's or dementia. But that was not the case with this woman. Yes, she was wheelchair bound, but her brain was amazing. Oh my gosh, we had incredible conversations. So I encourage everybody to go talk to somebody that's older and just say, hey, tell me a little bit about, and pick a topic or pick a era of life, because you will get such a unique perspective from them. It's amazing.
And I'm sure that was a wonderful moment for her too. We were talking about that feel good energy that just lasts. I'm sure she still has some of that. It's like the wave, it's a wave, it hits you and then it cascades. And
Yeah.
that's wonderful that you guys were able to have that moment. Yeah. And I think that we just need to be more open to that. Again, talking and figuring things out, because the fear is not knowing. And it's whether you, like you say, I'm just ask, if you see someone, like, do you need help? They'll tell you. Do you want to talk? I mean, it's amazing to me, and I'm learning more, and that's why this show exists now, is that the way I approach things, and that I'm never afraid to ask, is because you can't assume what someone else is feeling or thinking. And we do these stories in our heads, and we have it to the point that we take no action.
Right.
And the same thing goes with, if you see someone that I mean, there's no harm, no foul, like even in a waiting room. This is a short story, but it was just this, again, like your story with the woman in the restaurant. I was waiting for somebody to come back from physical therapy, and I just wait she goes every week, and I take her, and we just share time in the car and talk. And then when I'm in the waiting room, I take like my notes and my calendar, all the things. And I'm sitting there like a little busy bee, like all these thoughts, I got to get them out of my head and put them down on paper. And this gentleman comes in and he has a veteran hat on. And he is talking to somebody, and he's from Puerto Rico. And my best friend is from Puerto Rico. And so I was just like, oh my gosh, where? And he said, Arecibo. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. That's where she's from. And so I almost wanted to get her on the phone and be like, holy crap, like you two need to connect, because that was just a weird thing here in Charlotte. Now she's in Michigan, so, you know, they're not going to meet in person. But I just thought, what a small world. And we both had that little like spark of life and that funny like how small this world is, but you don't know how small it is until you start talking to people. And that was just so nice. And he said with just the heartfelt, like, I just so enjoyed talking to you. It was in a waiting room while people are waiting to go back and get their physical therapy. It's like 5 minutes, and it just, you could tell it just, and even the people around us were affected because they were all like, oh my gosh. I mean, it's a small waiting room and everybody's hearing the story. So I just say people start talking to people and just give people a gift by just seeing them and having a moment of just kindness. Maybe that's how we should, I know I don't want to keep you too long. And I know you're all about light. Even when we met, you shared, which is on my bulletin board in the corner, I still have it, that you hand wrote about the light and the brilliance and to keep it shining. And I so appreciate that. And that kind of anchors me every day to do this. But you have on your website, and I've seen it before, that you say, the best you is yet to be. And I just want to thank you, Dr. Loyo, for sharing all of your insight and your knowledge and, you know, putting it into this material piece of book that somebody can go and take home with them. And really, what a gift to help a family come up with this plan. I just want to thank you so much for your time today. And is there anything else before we kind of close out that I just want to make sure if there's something that you want to share that we have a moment to?
Well, first off, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being able to share information about longevity, which to me really is about being the healthiest you possibly can for as long as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And that is where the quote comes from. The best you's yet to come, because you still have the ability to be able to do whatever it is you choose to do, right? And I mean that from the point of view of, for example, there are programs that are called like From Couch Potato to Marathoner. Well, we're not going to run marathons probably at our age, but we can still take the steps to get healthier every day. Even if you can only walk for 5 minutes before you're winded, you can walk those 5 minutes multiple times a day to accumulate 30 minutes over time. Or maybe it's 20 minutes for a day for the first week. And then the following week, you try to do an extra 5 minutes somewhere in there. And then if every week you add 1 minute to each of those 5 minutes, before long, you will be walking for 30 minutes and you will be healthier. And so that better you is yet to come. Every day you gain more knowledge. Every day you could gain a new friend. Every day you can have a new experience. And all of these shape who you are, the life that you have, and then that light that you can shine back onto others. And so I encourage you to keep believing in yourself and your ability to get better, to have a better you every single day, no matter what's happening. And
I agree.
Yeah. And certainly sometime we may have to reframe who we are if we end up in a wheelchair or end up with rheumatoid arthritis that makes it painful to move a lot. We may have to reframe who we are and what we can do. But even then, most of us still have a voice and a brain and the ability to pick up the phone and share with other people. And so I encourage you to do that. Always think of what can you do for someone else to brighten their day, and do it, because that will in turn brighten your day. And like Lisa explained with her story about being in that waiting room, at a certain point in time, we kind of are in a waiting room of life, waiting to move on. And so we can make that as pleasant as we can for everybody around us and enrich everybody's world.
That's an interesting metaphor. Yeah. Yeah, the waiting room of life. Yeah, and I try to live that way too. And when I go to the senior center, and people get excited, and I'm like, okay, so what is something small that you can take back and implement. And with the Alzheimer's Association, I do community education too. And after each session, I'm like, is it this? And I'm showing my glass of water. Is it being more intentional about, getting water every day? But, we don't have to do everything all at once. But if we make these small changes over time, that's where, I think of the pitcher with the rock and the water, and that one drop a day does, but that over time it will go through the rock.
Right.
And so that to me sticks as a visual in being consistent and taking the thought out of a lot of things. And honestly, I mean, I'm not here to promote Nike, but to just do it. I mean, they really hit it on the head when they came up with that it is just doing it, because we put too much thought in the him and the ha and the why would I do, and there's just so much. It's like, it's the action, and it's the small action every day. Well, go ahead.
It is. It is the small steps. And it's also the small things that make the world of difference, right? I mean, sometimes it's just smile at somebody in line and say hello, and you'll see their face brighten, and then you get that kind of feedback where you feel good because you did something good for someone else, and it just kind of keeps going. It's an interesting effect, right? I mean, and the truth of the matter is, life's a roller coaster ride. We go up and it's exciting. Sometimes we go down and it's thrilling. Sometimes we go down and we're terrified. I mean, that's just life. And so we just have to embrace it for all it's worth. We do have to prepare for it, and that's what most of this conversation was all about. But it also is about embracing every moment that you have and every opportunity to make life better for yourself or somebody else. So,
oh, what a wonderful, yeah. And I really do believe that. And I know you live it, and I try to. And it's just that constant, like I say, the intention of each day. And I think that's how, when we can do that, that's a beautiful way to live. So, well, Karina, I thank you again so much. Where can people go to find out more about how to get in touch with you, how to, if they just want to go to Amazon and get the book and go, yes, I'm in, tell us what's the best way to go about that?
So I do have a website called thelongevityblueprint.org. Just to make it easy, it kind of goes with the name of the book, Longevity Blueprint. So longevityblueprint.org will have a link that will take you to Amazon. The book is available on Amazon as a paperback, hardback, or EPUB, where you can actually write in on your digital device if you have the right program. And then it's also available on Audible. On the Audible version, you won't be able to write in, and there's a lot of questions, so pausing it can be a challenge. But some people prefer to be able to listen. So you'll still get a lot out of listening. You'll just need to make sure that you have time to stop and think about those questions, because one of the reasons I wrote the Longevity Blueprint the way that I did is so that you have time and space within the book to write down some of the answers to questions that I ask you to reflect on. Because this whole blueprint thing and really understanding, who you are and what your desires are, it's all about really thinking through some of these deeper questions. And I don't know about you, but a lot of times I'll read a really good book and maybe I'll highlight some things and I think, oh, I got to come back and put that into my life or think deeper about how that applies to me in my life. And then I close the book because I'm done, and I hardly ever make it back to those books. And so when I wrote this one, I decided that's not going to happen. We're going to have space for people to write and answer some deep thought questions so that they can make some changes and integrate it into their life. So even if you do Audible, I still encourage you to stop and write, or maybe get the paperback version as well and write there too.
As a companion, because this is a companion process, and the book can be your companion in this moment. So, well, and I always say my conversations that we're curating, they're not an event. We need to get out of the thought of that instant gratification that we're going to get an answer right then. We're not.
Right.
This is not what this is about. It's about a process. So it's not an event of something, it's a process. But the point that I think you and I both are passionate about is starting that process. So, well, okay, I again appreciate you so much, and thank you so much for joining us. And maybe sometime soon we can have another focus and invite you back for part 2.
Wonderful. I'd be delighted.
Thanks for joining me on Not Ready Yet, Curating Conversations for the Aging Journey. If something in this episode gave you clarity or the courage to start an important conversation, or offered a new way to look at things, I hope you'll share it with someone who might need the same encouragement. Remember, navigating aging isn't something we have to do alone or in crisis. With love, logic, and the right tools, we can face what's next with confidence and connection. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling generous, leave a review. It helps others find the show. And just a quick note, the information shared on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for medical, psychiatric, legal, or other professional advice. Always consult a qualified professional for guidance tailored to your unique situation. This is Lisa Harper, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.